Someone married into the family, got a title he could not spell the responsibilities of, and fired the one person keeping the whole operation legal. She didn't argue. She didn't even flinch. She just walked out the door the night before everything was about to go very, very wrong. Stay to the end for my take. I can't wait to see yours in the comments. I have never been able to explain my job at a dinner party. People hear port agent and they picture someone standing on a dock with a clipboard. What I actually did for 11 years at Hargroves Maritime Services was keep container ships legal. Every vessel that enters the Houston Ship Canal needs an authorized agent on file with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection before a single container comes off the deck. That agent coordinates the Customs Manifest Reconciliation, the Advance Cargo Declarations, the Importer Security Filing, the 10+2 we call it, and the interface with the terminal operating system that assigns berth windows. Miss the 10+2 deadline by 4 hours and custom holds the entire vessel. That hold cost roughly $40,000 a day. I was the named agent of record for 3 shipping line accounts: Pacific Meridian, Constellation Line, and Voss Global. My name sat on the CBP filings, the surety bond applications, and the Port Authority berth priority agreements. Changing an agent of record is not like changing a password. It requires a new power of attorney filing, a fresh surety bond, usually $50,000 minimum, background vetting, and a processing window of 30 to 45 days. I renewed those filings every year the way most people renew a parking permit. It was just something I did in February. Hargrove was a family operation, 32 employees, founded by Gerald Hargrove in 1987. I knew every harbor pilot on the Houston rotation by voice. I knew which customs inspectors wanted their documentation stapled and which ones wanted it clipped. I knew that the terminal operator at Barber's Cut preferred email confirmations before 7 in the morning, and that the one at Bayport would only respond to texts after noon. The company ran on relationships and federal paperwork, and I maintained both. I first heard Garrett Elkins' name in March, when Gerald's daughter Catherine mentioned at a staff lunch that her husband would be helping out with operations. She said it the way you would say a neighbor's kid would be mowing the lawn. By April, Garrett had a title: Director of Operational Efficiency. He had business cards printed before he had a desk. Garrett Elkins had an MBA from a program I had never heard of, and 3 years at a consulting firm that specialized in, as he put it, lean operational transformations for mid-market enterprises. He wore slim-fit suits in an office where most of us dressed for the possibility of boarding a vessel on short notice. His shoes had never touched a gangway. His first week, he scheduled a meeting he called Operational Alignment. I sat in a conference room that smelled like the diesel from the channel, while he projected a slide deck with the words Process Democratization across the top in blue gradient. The problem I am seeing, he said, adjusting his cuffs, is a lot of tribal knowledge. Critical workflows living inside individual people's heads instead of scalable, transferable systems. He looked directly at me when he said that. Specifically, Ellen, I want to understand your bandwidth situation. You are managing 3 accounts solo, and from a lean methodology perspective, that is a single point of failure we need to systematize. I set my coffee down. The accounts are not solo managed because of bandwidth. They are sole managed because each shipping line's agent of record is a named individual on federal filings. Changing the name requires a new power of attorney, a fresh surety bond, CBP background vetting, and a minimum processing window of 30 to 45 days. Per account. He blinked. Right, he said. So we will want to build a playbook around that so it is not bottlenecked. A playbook. For federal regulatory filings. I almost asked if the playbook would include the part where Inspector Davis at Barber's Cut requires original wet signatures on amended manifests, or just the part where someone Googles CBP Form 3171. Over the next 6 weeks, Garrett restructured. He consolidated what he called redundant client-facing roles. 2 junior agents left. 1 quit, 1 was laid off. He replaced the birth scheduling whiteboard with project management software that did not interface with the Port Authority's system. He sent a company-wide email announcing that all client communications would now be routed through a centralized intake process so that no single team member becomes a dependency. The harbor pilots started calling me at home. Ellen, who is this guy emailing us form letters about schedule optimization? We do not respond to form letters. I told them I understood. I did. Gerald Hargrove said nothing. He was 74 and tired, and his daughter loved Garrett. And Garrett used words like scalable with the confidence of someone who had never seen what happens when a vessel misses its berth window. The senior customs broker, Jim Okafor, walked into my office one afternoon and closed the door. He is going to come for you, Jim said. You cost the most, and he understands you the least. I nodded. Jim was right. I started making copies. The call came at 5:01 on a Thursday evening. I was packing my bag, already thinking about the 3 Pacific Meridian vessels that were 4 days from the Suez Canal en route to Houston. Garrett's voice was smooth, almost rehearsed. Ellen, I wanted to connect with you on a headcount optimization decision that impacts your role. 4 minutes. That is how long it took. He said the company was moving toward a distributed knowledge model. He said my accounts would be transitioned to a scalable team-based approach. He said my last day was Friday, tomorrow. I appreciate your contributions, he said. You have been a real value add. I said, of course. He paused. I think he expected something else. An argument? A list of reasons. A reminder of the ship's 4 days from Suez. I understand completely, I said. I will have my desk cleared by end of day tomorrow. Great, he said. And then, almost as an afterthought, is there anything critical I should know about for next week? I thought about the 3 vessels. I thought about the 10+2 filings due 24 hours before arrival. I thought about the fact that my name, not Hargrove Maritime's name, my name was the only one CBP would recognize on those filings. Nothing that is not in the system, I said. I packed my things on Friday morning. I took my time. I forwarded my personal contact list, the harbor pilots, the customs inspectors, the terminal operators, to my personal email. That list was mine. I had built it over 11 years of 6 a.m. calls and holiday coverage. The lobby was quiet. The receptionist would not look at me. I badged out and walked to my car in the parking garage and sat there for a long time with the engine off, looking at the ship channel through the gap in the concrete. Then I drove home and made dinner. Fun fact, Demurrage fines do not care about your MBA. I need you to subscribe because I cannot have you missing what happens next. Hit it. Don't make me route the request through a centralized intake process. The first vessel arrived on Tuesday. Pacific Meridian's MV Coastal Fortuna, 4,200 containers, scheduled for Barber's Cut at 600. I know this because Jim Okafor called me at 5:47 in the morning. "Ellen," he said, "no one filed the 10+2. Customs is holding the vessel at anchor." I was watering tomato plants. I had started a garden the week before. It surprised me how much I liked dirt under my nails instead of toner on my fingers. "Who did Garrett assign to the account?" I asked. "He did not assign anyone. He said the centralized intake process would handle it." "The centralized intake process," I repeated. I set down the watering can. "Jim, the centralized intake process is a shared email inbox." The Coastal Fortuna sat at anchor for 3 days. Demurrage charges hit $120,000 before anyone at Hargrove understood what a 10+2 filing was. Garrett spent the first day trying to file the customs declaration himself and was rejected because his name was not on the agent of record authorization. The second vessel, MV Pacific Envoy, arrived Thursday. Same result. No authorized agent, no filing, no berth. By Friday, the third vessel was in the Gulf, and Garrett was in Gerald Hargrove's office screaming about system failures. Gerald, who had been doing this since before Garrett was born, reportedly looked at him and said, "The system was Ellen." The shipping line's VP of Global Logistics, a woman named Sandra Chen, called me directly. I was sitting on my patio reading a novel, the kind of long, slow book I had not touched in years. "Ellen, what is happening in Houston?" she asked. "I was let go last week," I said. The silence lasted long enough that I could hear her calculating. I almost helped. That is the part I do not talk about much. Sandra asked me a question about the berth priority agreement, a specific clause I had negotiated that gave Pacific Meridian guaranteed morning windows during peak season. I knew the answer. It was sitting in my chest like a reflex. 11 years of answering every call on the first ring does not disappear in a week. I opened my mouth. I closed it. "I think Hargrove's team can walk you through that," I said. My hands were shaking. She said, "Ellen, Hargrove's team does not know what a berth priority agreement is." Demurrage across all 3 vessels crossed $400,000. The terminal operator at Barber's Cut stopped returning Hargrove's calls entirely. They did not have a relationship with anyone at the company except me. Pacific Meridian's legal team sent a formal notice of intent to terminate their agency contract. Constellation Line and Voss Global followed within the week. Garrett held what Jim described as an all-hands accountability session, where he asked the remaining staff to collaboratively identify the process gaps. No one spoke. Sandra Chen called me again 3 weeks later. This time it was not a question. "We want to hire you," she said. "Dedicated Gulf Coast port agent. You would manage our Houston operations directly. We are pulling our account from Hargrove regardless, but we would like you on our side of the table." She named a salary that was more than double what Hargrove had paid me. I said yes. The meeting was at Hargrove's office. Sandra insisted. Pacific Meridian needed their cargo manifest transition, and the only person who could authorize the transfer of berth priority agreements was the person whose name was on the original filing. Me. I wore a navy blazer I had bought that week. Sharp, deliberate, the kind of thing I never would have worn to Hargrove because you do not wear good clothes to an office where you might get called to a vessel inspection. I was not going to vessel inspections anymore. I was the client now. Gerald was in the room. Garrett was in the room. 2 Pacific Meridian lawyers flanked Sandra. Garrett would not look at me. I opened my folder and began walking through the transition. The agent of record transfer requires Form CBP 5106 with a revised power of attorney. The surety bond novation will take approximately 30 days. In the interim, Pacific Meridian's cargo cannot clear customs under Hargrove's authorization because the named agent, me, is no longer employed there. But the company, Garrett started. The company is not the agent of record, I said. I am. The filing is in my name. That is what named agent means. Then Sandra added the detail that changed everything. We have also been advised that the surety bonds backing Hargrove's authority to act as agent for Constellation and Voss Global were co-signed under Ellen's personal guarantor status. Without her, those bonds may need to be re-underwritten. Gerald closed his eyes. I had not thought of it as leverage when I co-signed those bonds. The bonding company trusted me, and Hargrove was small. It was just part of the job. But without my guarantor status, Hargrove's authority to operate as a licensed agent for any of their major accounts was in question. Garrett said, I think we need to circle back on this with our internal team. Your internal team, Sandra said, does not have the federal clearance to file the paperwork you need filed. Garrett left early. Gerald stayed. He shook my hand at the door and said, I should have listened. I said, I know. Within 2 months, Gerald moved Garrett out of operations. His new title was Special Projects Coordinator. No direct reports, no client contact, an office next to the supply closet. Catherine stopped speaking to Gerald for the rest of the spring. I run my own port agency now, Briggs Maritime Consulting. I have 4 employees and contracts with Pacific Meridian and 2 other shipping lines that found me after the Houston situation made the rounds at the International Ship Agents Association conference. Hargrove Maritime survived, but smaller. They lost their berth priority status at Barber's Cut and had to rebuild their customs authorization from scratch, a process that took 5 months and cost them 3 more accounts. Garrett Elkins still works at Hargrove. Technically, his LinkedIn says Director of Operational Efficiency. It has not been updated since last spring. Jim Okafor tells me. Garrett mostly attends meetings where nothing is decided and sends emails no one reads. I wake up at 5:30 most mornings. I check the vessel tracking system, review the day's filings, call the harbor pilots by name. The work is the same. The respect is different. Some people have asked me if I should have warned them, if I should have told Garrett about the ships, the filings, the bonds. I think about that sometimes, usually in the morning, when the channel is still dark and the first vessel lights are just visible on the horizon. I do not have a clean answer. I just have a company with my name on the door. When Garrett asked if there was anything critical for the next week, and she said, "Nothing that's not in the system." Right move, or did she cross a line? Drop your take in the comments. Subscribe if you have not. And, well, here's my take. The part that kills me is the word bottleneck. Heard someone explain federal regulatory filings, named agent authorization, security bonds, real words that mean real things, and his brain went bottleneck. That is the consulting disease right there. You learn one framework and suddenly everything looks like an inefficiency you can optimize. He didn't ask a single follow-up question, not one. He just decided that if he didn't understand it, it must not be important. And honestly, I think that's the most dangerous person in any company. Not the one who doesn't know, but the one who does not know and never thinks to ask.